You know, I quite like it here. I wonder if you understand. I have a fine view of the forest. I love the forest. That is why I like it here. When I'm here watching the forest, I need nothing else at all. Oh my, I almost forgot about the frolicking children. Their smiles are important too. Once upon a time in a faraway village, there lived a woodcutter who always boasted of his strength. It is said that the woodcutter wanted to test his own strength by felling the tallest tree in the forest. He hastily ventured deep into the forest in search. Meanwhile, the forest told the great tree of the woodcutter. The great tree sighed deeply, lamenting his foolishness, and he continued to sigh. And before long, the breath of the great tree became a thick and heavy fog which shrouded the forest. The woodcutter soon lost his way. He grew so tired wandering about that he soon took a short rest. Just then, sweet-smelling fluffs began to float down from above. All who would smell their sweet scent would fall fast asleep. The woodcutter couldn't help but to fall in a deep slumber, and there he lay, snoring great snores in the middle of the forest. For 3 days he slept. On the morning of the 4th day, a birdman flew down to where he lay. He spoke to him. "I'm the strongest, you always say. One fight with me, if you may." But the woodcutter remained fast asleep. "You can try to sleep if you must, but I shall wake you with my dust." As he spoke those words, the birdman sprinkled a glistening white powder upon the woodcutter. With that, the woodcutter sneezed a great sneeze and jumped to his feet. The surprised woodcutter shouted, "Who on earth are you? I warn you, I am incredibly strong, and I will battle right now." The birdman replied, "You can't defeat me, but if you do, we can be friends and I'll share my powder with you. It cures all illness and turns old to new. I got it from the forest people called the Yamu." The woodcutter tried to grab the birdman, but the woodcutter had been asleep for 3 days. He was too hungry to hold on. With one flap of his mighty wings, the birdman blew the woodcutter all the way back to the village. The woodcutter told the villagers all about the strange birdman, but not a soul believed him. From that day on, the woodcutter never again boasted of his strength. understand? The divine tree of the forest is an incarnation of Elrum. You must never think of harming it. It is always watching over us. There are many other tales with the Birdman. It seems they all say that he hates fire. Perhaps he was barbecued in a previous life. So why did you become a Cocoon master? Because they made you? For the sake of the village? You must not think that way. Many years ago, the children of the village used to come to hear my stories. You were one of them. You always played the flute, even when you were a little boy. Even the rowdiest children would calm down when you started playing. And now, do you still like the flute? If so, then be strong and gentle like the flute. This is a tale of the kingdom of Gehenna Pali that stretched across these lands long ago. Once upon a time, Prince Menek, son of King Karis, set out with his vassals to hunt in the forest. But in the forest they were enveloped by a thick fog, and the prince lost his way. Wandering aimlessly about, he happened upon a marsh from which grew an enormous tree. Thereupon he heard the sound of sobbing, but he knew not from where. He found a maiden sitting all alone. She was weeping by the marsh. "I am Alcana. I just buried my mother here in the marsh of Uban," she said. And then she looked up at the prince. He was overwhelmed by her beautiful eyes. The maiden stole his heart that day. It was truly a fateful meeting. Thereafter, the prince made frequent trips into the forest. Undoubtedly, he was paying visits to the maiden. The maiden had a strange power. She could talk to the insects and trees. Before long, there began a terrible rumor that the prince's heart had been stolen by a witch. One day, the maiden spun silk from fairy cocoons and wove it into a beautiful cloth for the king. But the brilliance of that cloth cast a shadow upon the kingdom. The king was so enthralled by the fairy silk that he sent his soldiers into the forest, where they ravaged for fairy cocoons. The fairies, still in their cocoons, were boiled alive. The king killed them so he could have their silk. The prince pleaded with his father to stop his cruelty, but the king was no longer the man he had once been. Prince Menek was charged with treason and imprisoned in the king's deepest dungeon. He was never heard from again. When the maiden learned of the prince's death, she cursed her fate and lamented the foolishness of man. She then cast herself away into the marsh where her mother lay. As she started to drown, a voice from nowhere whispered to her, "I am Elrum. I shall grant you your wish. Tell me what you want," said the voice. The maiden told Elrum all that weighed upon her heart. The maiden said, "Greed bears destructive knowledge. Its wicked power shall be the end of the forest. All hope is lost. The beasts of knowledge shall never live in peace with the forest. The one light of hope, who I so loved, has perished at the hands of the beasts. I now go to where my love Menek awaits." Thereupon Elrum spoke again. So you claim that your true love was torn asunder by the greed and hatred of the beasts of knowledge? When light is swallowed up by darkness, I shall unleash ruin upon the land, returning all to the nothingness from whence it came. I have a firm grip upon the darkness in your heart. From that day forward, demons appeared in the forest,